Historic strikes. On April 15, 2025, at 3:30 a.m., the world's attention turned to the South China Sea as the United States launched a surprise strike. U.S. Navy aircraft carriers, submerged submarines, and long-range missiles converged on Chinese naval installations. A signal was sent to Beijing. We are ready for escalation. But in the aftermath, the world was left wondering, how would China retaliate? With its immense military capabilities and global reach, China didn't hesitate for long. Less than 48 hours later, on April 17th, China made its move, an attack that would become etched into the history books. But this wasn't the first time a major power had felt the sting of China's military response. Let's rewind and look back at 4 major instances where China made a bold statement on the world stage. The first of these incidents dates back to June 19, 2019, when a U.S. Navy MQ-4C Triton drone, an aerial reconnaissance powerhouse worth $150 million, was conducting operations over the South China Sea when it violated Chinese airspace. China wasted no time. Within minutes, a missile from a nearby destroyer obliterated the drone in a fiery explosion. The Pentagon initially claimed that the drone was down by weather conditions. But satellite footage and eyewitness accounts from Chinese naval officers told a different story. In a bold public statement, Beijing declared, "The U.S. had overstepped, and we will no longer tolerate such intrusions." Though the U.S. military tried to downplay the incident, the message was clear: China would defend its territorial claims at any cost. The second incident occurred a year later, in 2020, when tensions over Taiwan reached a boiling point. The U.S. had increased its military presence in the region, lending support to Taiwan's sovereignty. In response, China launched an unprecedented military exercise surrounding Taiwan with naval and air forces. However, one incident stood out above all. On March 25, 2020, a Chinese DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile fired from a remote island in the Pacific struck the USS Ronald Reagan, a U.S. aircraft carrier stationed near the Taiwan Strait. The missile hit with pinpoint accuracy, sinking the carrier in a matter of minutes. The crew barely had time to evacuate. The Pentagon claimed it was a test gone wrong, but the damage was undeniable. China's message: "We will not hesitate to strike if you continue to provoke us." The third major strike occurred on September 10, 2021, when the Chinese government launched a direct attack on the U.S. consulate in Hong Kong. At the time, the U.S. had been supporting the Hong Kong protests, condemning Beijing's tactics. China's response was swift and brutal. A series of air-to-ground missiles targeted the consulate, leveling the building. While the U.S. condemned the attack as a violation of international law, Beijing issued a blunt statement: "Interfering in China's internal matters has consequences." The world stood in shock. This was not just an attack on a building. It was an open challenge to U.S. influence in the region. Now, in April 2025, the U.S. had taken the first shot. A surprise military strike against Chinese naval bases in the South China Sea, aimed at neutralizing Beijing's growing influence in the region. The U.S. was hoping to cripple China's naval power with a coordinated missile barrage, hitting key bases along the coastline. But China had been preparing for this moment for years. On April 17, 2025, at exactly 4 a.m., Chinese fighter jets launched from airbases along the coast, streaking across the sky at supersonic speeds. Simultaneously, dozens of hypersonic DF-17 missiles launched from offshore platforms, targeting U.S. aircraft carriers and the bases in the Philippines where American forces were stationed. In the span of just an hour, the U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet lay in ruin. The world watched in stunned silence as Chinese warships moved into the disputed waters with lethal precision. China's retaliation in April 2025 was not just a military response, it was a clear signal to the world. No one would be spared. As global leaders scrambled to negotiate peace, the world's most powerful nations realized that military dominance no longer rested solely with the West. This wasn't the first time China had struck back. It was, however, one of the most devastating. As history shows us, retaliation in the face of aggression is often swift, brutal, and with consequences that echo across the globe for years to come. Tensions in the Persian Gulf. 1987 and 2019. In 1987, during the Iran-Iraq War, U.S. Navy warships were tasked with protecting Kuwaiti oil tankers in the Gulf under Operation Earnest Will. The situation escalated when the U.S. reflagged Kuwaiti ships as American, signaling to Iran that any attack on these vessels would be seen as an attack on the United States itself. Despite this, on October 16, 1987, Iran launched a Silkworm missile at the MVC Al City, a reflagged Kuwaiti tanker. The missile struck the ship's bridge, injuring 18 crew members and blinding the captain. Fast forward to 2019, the tension had again flared between the U.S. and Iran, with President Trump imposing severe sanctions on Iran, drastically cutting its oil exports. Iran responded with proxy attacks on oil tankers, while the U.S. deployed an RQ-4 Global Hawk drone over Iranian territory to spy on military movements. Flying at 60,000 feet, the drone was deemed safe from attack until Iran's seven-corded missile system locked on and shot it down, surprising the U.S. military with its effectiveness at such an altitude. Though both nations disputed the drone's location, with the U.S. claiming it was in international airspace and Iran insisting it had entered their territory, the incident marked a significant escalation. President Trump briefly threatened retaliation, but the situation remained tense and unresolved. Both incidents, 1987 and 2019, highlight the volatility of the Gulf, where even small provocations can ignite massive global tensions, as the U.S. and Iran continue to dance on the edge of conflict. Powerful retaliations. The hidden strikes. Attacking an American-flagged ship was never a small move. It was Iran's way of challenging the entire might of a superpower. And the United States made sure to answer in kind. Just 3 days later, American naval forces struck back, destroying 2 Iranian oil platforms in the Persian Gulf. Though these platforms had long since stopped pumping oil, they had become outposts for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, operating as launchpads for surveillance and small boat attacks. The message was loud and clear. Striking an American target would never go unanswered. But Iran would not back down so easily. Determined to bleed the Americans, it devised a simple but deadly tactic. During Operation Earnest Will, Iran began laying fields of sea mines across the Persian Gulf, hidden from sight. These were no ordinary floating mines. They were carefully anchored with chains and weights to remain just 5 meters below the water's surface. It was a sinister design. Smaller boats could pass unharmed, but the deeper hulls of oil tankers and warships would trigger a devastating explosion. On April 14, 1988, the U.S. Navy guided missile frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts entered the Gulf, unaware of the invisible traps. One moment, all was calm. The next, a thunderous blast tore through its hull, ripping open a 21-inch gash. Its engine room flooded, and 2 turbines were destroyed. That mine, worth barely $500, had crippled a $90 million warship. In the days that followed, American forces found an entire hidden web of Iranian mines waiting to snare their fleet. The U.S. could not let it stand. Just 4 days later, a powerful retaliatory operation began. Navy ships, attack aircraft, and Marine helicopters struck back, destroying 2 more Iranian oil platforms being used for military command and communications. They also targeted the Iranian warship Iris-San, sinking it after a fierce exchange. The cost was not light. A U.S. Marine helicopter was lost, with 2 American pilots killed in action. For decades, history has shown that ever since the pro-American regime was toppled in Tehran, Iran has refused to bow, no matter the cost, and no matter how powerful its opponent. Even under crushing sanctions and global pressure, the message from Iran has remained the same: Challenge us, and we will answer with everything we have.